Good afternoon, everyone. This is Stone Gasman live from New York City. And today we are going to be doing an audio commentary for the 1950 film My Blue Heaven, directed by Henry Koster and starring Betty Grable, Dan Daly, and Mitzi Gaynor in her film debut. And for those of you who have been watching my channel for a while, I know that I started this commentary twice. And due to some unfortunate technical issues, I wasn't able to finish it. And so I decided, well, you know, I didn't feel comfortable with the commentaries as they were, so I ended up deleting them. Now, this is going to be the last time that I do this. As much as I love this movie, and yes, I've seen this movie probably about 15 times over the course of the past 3 years. The truth of the matter is that this is going to be the final attempt. Whatever I have to do in editing after that, I'll have to do. So this is going to be our second to last commentary for a movie with Mitzi Gaynor. I have been doing the Mitzi Gaynor movies since last month. We started out with just 2 days before her birthday. And we've done 15 commentaries now, and this is number 16. And it's kind of weird that this ended up being one of the last ones, because this is her first film. But I also think it actually fits, considering the fact that there is a wonderful Halloween musical number, which is something you don't often see in films, particularly at this time with musicals and everything. And but we'll talk about all that. So I'm really looking forward to knocking this out. So I'm very happy that you all are joining me. And just to let you know, My Blue Heaven is only available on DVD. You can view clips on YouTube. And if you were going to set out in the high seas, I'm sure you would find a version uploaded somewhere on YouTube. But yeah, this is pretty much only available on this out of print Fox DVD, which you can still get on eBay for $20, and I do highly recommend it. We'll talk about the DVD a little near the end of the commentary. So why don't we go ahead and just get started here? So I am on the play screen for My Blue Heaven. I just clicked on that, and it will start the 20th Century Fox logo on the count of 3, 2, 1, and play. And here is the 1950 20th Century Fox logo. I love the different lights, the different colored spotlights, which is not, you don't often see that with these 20th Century Fox movies, even at this time. But, 1950, after the decade of the 40s, I mean, black and white had pretty much been phased out by this time because, I mean, it really wouldn't really fully phase out until the 60s. But in the 40s, like every Best Picture winner was black and white. And then in 1950, then you started getting movies that won Best Picture that were in color. And so the first time I saw this, I was so taken aback by the colors, not just the song. I mean, the song is very recognizable, of course, but the colors here, the pink and the blue against the picket fence set backdrop. It's so gorgeous, and like I said, my eyes practically popped when I saw this on DVD for the first time. It was so gorgeous. We will be talking about film editor James B. Clark a little bit later, as well as the Friendly Island number by Seymour Felix. Yes, this produced by Saul C. Siegel. And Saul C. Siegel had actually produced another film with Mitzi Gaynor called Les Girls, which we will be doing later today at 6 p.m. Maybe a little bit later than that, but I should be ready by 6 p.m. and it'll be the very last commentary that we do. So we're going to close out the project, the Mitzi Gaynor commentary project, with both of the films that were produced by Saul C. Siegel, My Blue Heaven and Les Girls. But this is not a Mitzi Gaynor movie, as a matter of fact. This is, of course, was her film debut at Fox. This movie is actually a movie that belongs to Betty Grable. Betty Grable, of course, was a huge 20th Century Fox star at the time. And she had replaced Alice Faye, who was Fox's leading lady throughout the 30s. And then Grable started making movies at Fox in the 40s. And at the time, in 1943, she had become world famous by a very famous picture where we just see her back and she's turning her head. And that was the picture that all these soldiers and sailors had over their bunks or wherever they went during World War II. So she became known as basically the queen of pinups during the war, because and here's the big thing: she was actually 5 months pregnant when they took that picture. Obviously, you can't tell, because we only see her back, but that just makes the picture all the more extraordinary. I mean, to be perfectly honest. Now, here we have David Wayne and Jane Wyatt as Walter and Janet Pringle, who are I guess they're supposed to be like the rival couple of Betty Grable and Dan Daly at this radio station, where of course they sing variety songs, novelty songs, that kind of thing. And this movie is basically a collection of novelty songs. My Blue Heaven being the most famous, although that was done by different writers. Now, I will say before this musical number starts is that when most people think of My Blue Heaven nowadays, they don't think of this movie and they don't think of the song, but they in fact think of the 1990 movie called My Blue Heaven from Warner Brothers, which actually was a quasi sequel to Goodfellas. I mean, it was essentially, it was directed by Herbert Ross and written by Nora Ephron. And the story goes is that when the screenwriter for Goodfellas, who was married to Nora Ephron at the time, Nora Ephron would get these crazy phone calls in the middle of the night from the writer of Goodfellas. His name escapes me, unfortunately. I know he's the star of the movie, but he made these insane phone calls to Nora Ephron in the middle of the night. And so she decided, you know what, I'm going to write a script of of this gangster in the Federal Witness Protection Program. And so they cast Steve Martin and Rick Moranis. But to close out this conversation on the 1990 film, My Blue Heaven, the only connection, literally the only connection that these two films have is the title song, which is in fact played over the credits of both movies. And I actually love the opening credits to both of the movies. The only difference, there's only one slight difference. In the 1950 version, the My Blue Heaven song is sung by Betty Grable and Dan Daly. And for 1990, it was sung by Fats Domino, who of course was another huge singer here at the time in the 1950s. But that is the only connection. The only connection whatsoever. All I can say is, as a friend of mine on Twitter said, I think that Nora Ephron was just feeling very nostalgic when she wrote My Blue Heaven, and she thought, oh, you know what? Let me incorporate the song. And but aside from that, there's absolutely zero connection between these two movies, aside from the title and the song, of course, with different composers. But speaking of the music for the 1950 version of My Blue Heaven, the score was done by Alfred Newman, who did many other films at Fox during this time. And I've talked about him in some of the other commentaries for movies that he worked on along with Mitzi Gaynor. And the lyrics for both of these films were courtesy of Ralph Blaine and Howard Arlen. Howard Arlen, of course, became very famous for doing Under the Rainbow for Judy Garland, and like I said, this is basically, if you don't count the title song, there's about eight novelty songs that make up the course of this 96-minute musical. And let me just say, I've watched a lot of musicals from the 1940s and 50s this year, particularly ones with Betty Grable. In fact, I saw all 4 films that Betty Grable and Dan Daly did. And let me just say, let me just say that a lot of these movies, they're named after songs, and they're essentially pastiches of song and dance shows with dialogue scenes sprinkled throughout. And in this case, this is a song called It's Deductible, which was basically commenting on the baby boomer uh, generation just after the war, and how couples can save money by having children, by filing taxes and making them deductible. So it starts out with this wonderful novelty song, and the truth is, this is a rarity in that every single song in this movie, every single one, I loved. I mean, it wasn't just the dancing or the vocals or everything. Just this was one of those corkers that was a rarity in that every single song I thought was, you know, ear candy, essentially. I'm actually very, very surprised at how much this musical won me over. Now, I mentioned before Betty Grable and Dan Daly. They had done 4 musicals at 20th Century Fox. And I should point out first off that Betty Grable, of course, was a huge star at the time, very, very generous to her co-stars, and she was looking for a leading man for My Blue Heaven. Excuse me, for a movie in 1947 called Mother Wore Tights. Yes. In 1947, she made a movie called Mother Wore Tights, which was essentially about a vaudeville family. They meet, they fall in love, they have kids, and of course the kids want to learn to sing just like their parents. And it was a lot of these musicals, of course, went back to vaudeville and that era where so many people, so many entertainers got their stage skills and dance skills from that era. I talked a lot about in yesterday's commentary for The Joker is Wild, about like people like George Jessel and all those guys that were Sophie Tucker, all these wonderful people that had learned their skills on vaudeville and eventually Broadway, and then eventually in films. And David Wayne, of course, is one of those people that was huge, huge on the stage. When he played in the Mr. Roberts role that Jack Lemmon eventually won the Oscar for. But yeah, this was a rarity in that every single song I found to be an utter delight. I fell in love with Betty Grable because of this movie. Dan Daly was dynamite as far as I'm concerned. And I really love the supporting cast, not just Mitzi Gaynor, David Wayne, Jane Wyatt, and of course Una Merkel, who we will see later. I mean, an ideal supporting cast. Perfectly placed numbers, not too many, not too little. And it tells a very, very solid story about a radio star couple who, quite simply, they just want a baby. And during right before the It's Deductible number, Betty Grable, in fact, lets her husband know that she is in fact pregnant. And of course, the Pringles already have like 6 children. So, so of course they've been, I love this little exchange about the dill pickle, just because I'm such a dill pickle aficionado. I mean, nobody loves dill pickles more than me. So that was just a little extra, a little sprinkle of whipped cream there. I guess you could say, or candy sprinkles, what you could say. Because I mean, the irony is that when I was young, I used to go to the 7-Eleven and buy jars of pickles instead of candy. Not a joke. In fact, I would even go so far as to drink the pickle juice. But anyway, back to the commentary. Now, this is, as the commentator Drew Casper likes to say, this is a metaphorical stage in the Pringles apartment where they're singing another novelty song. And the whole idea is that these entertainers, they're just not, they don't just do song and dances when they're on the stage or when they're in front of a camera, but they also do it in their homes, when they're not working. They're just singing and dancing all the time, according to these movies. And that's why there's a lot of scenes where they're singing in apartments or farms or wherever the case may be, just anywhere but a stage. Now, this is a stage, obviously. This is a 20th Century Fox set, but here again, what it implies is that a lot of these singers and dancers, they also sing and dance in their off time, not just when they're on stage being paid. Now, Jane Wyatt, right here, very, very, very beautiful. She had started out in films in 1934, and in fact, her most famous role is in Frank Capra's Lost Horizon from 1937. Although, when I was growing up, the role that I knew her from was actually her last movie, because she had. I mean, a lot of people knew her from Father Knows Best because she played the wife on that for like 9 seasons. But the truth is, a lot of people nowadays, the only thing they really know Jane Wyatt now from is playing Spock's mother, not just on the television series in the '60s, but also her very last movie was Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, which I think is not only the best movie of '86, but also the best Star Trek movie, period. And in fact, when you look at the credits, it actually says special appearance by Jane Wyatt. And you only see her in one scene. I mean, Spock is basically, after the search for Spock and after he died and they brought him back, he is on a computer system when he wants to make sure that his his Katra is back in place and that he has all his knowledge back, testing his skills. And so when the computer asks him, how do you feel? He doesn't know how to answer the question because, even though he's half human, he, basically suppresses emotion for logic, right? So here we have Jane Wyatt coming in as his mother and basically tries to let him know that, look, you're still half human. Remember, you still have the capability to feel emotions. You still have the capability to be emotionally compromised. And it's only one scene, but she is so lovely in it, and wears a pretty nice dress with a interesting hair hat piece as well. But yeah, I mean, that's where I knew her from. But she was born in 1910. She passed away at the age of 96. Yeah, in fact, she passed away the same year that this DVD came out. The same year that this DVD came out in 2006. But she passed away at 96. And while in New York City, she attended Miss Chapin School, where she had roles as Joan of Arc and as Shylock. And she later attended 2 years of Barnard College. After leaving Barnard, she joined the apprentice school of the Berkshire Playhouse at Stockbridge, Massachusetts, where for 6 months she played a variety of roles. One of her first jobs on Broadway was as an understudy to Rose Hobart in a production of Trade Winds, a career move that cost her a listing in the New York Social Register. And she made her film debut in 1934 in One More River. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pause on talking about Jane Wyatt here because this is a perfect example of all throughout this film. Like, there's these massive highs, the characters are, experiencing great joy, and then, on the drop of a dime, then we have to deal with tragedy. And, the truth is that, Dan Dailey, he couldn't, he was drinking and they have an accident. And because of that car accident, she has in fact lost the baby very, very tragically. And so she's, obviously she's had this traumatic experience and she doesn't know, how to move forward because, she just wanted a baby. Of all things in the world, she just wanted to be a mother. And then this disaster happens. And it kind of, eventually they're going to go to an adoption agency. But yeah, this is just a perfect example of this film where, there's these massive highs and then there's these massive lows. And I think it works. And surprisingly, it works best in this film. In terms of the quartet of films that Betty Grable and Dan Dailey did at 20th Century Fox, which I need to get those out of the way off the bat. Now, Mother Wore Tights in 1947 was the highest grossing 20th Century Fox movie that year. And in fact, it was fifth overall for box office that year. And, massive, massive success. And, for Dan Dailey and Betty Grable, it was a dream come true because they loved working together. They had a great amount of affection and respect for each other, so much so that they were, when they met. Well, actually, let me back up just one second because In 1946, Betty Grable and Daryl Zanuck, who ran 20th Century Fox, began basically scouting around for a male lead for Mother Wore Tights, and Betty wanted Fred Astaire. Now, Fred Astaire, of course, was famous for doing all those movies with Ginger Rogers in the 30s, Top Hat, that kind of thing. She wanted Fred Astaire. She begged Daryl Zanuck to have Fred Astaire be her leading man. Zanuck, for whatever reason, did not go for it. Maybe because he was at another studio and was just too expensive, or he felt, and admittedly, I'm borrowing from Drew Casper from his commentary here, or admittedly, Zanuck just felt that the chemistry was not going to be there. Maybe he felt that there would have been something off, and so so they didn't get Fred Astaire. And then there was talk of bringing in James Cagney. Now, I know that sounds like an outrageous idea, but look, James Cagney had a lot of Broadway experience, a lot of dance experience. A lot of people know him from his gangster films from the 1930s. But in fact, he had a wide range of talents. I mean, one of his most famous roles is in the 1942 film Yankee Doodle Dandy. And he's, oh god, he just is, he plays George M. Cohan in that, and it's a magnificent performance. I mean, certainly one of Cagney's best, maybe in his top 3 as far as I'm concerned. And that movie is also famous because of a massive stairwell scene in the very last sequence, where he just basically, he just kind of skips down the stairs in a dance-like mode perfectly. Like, he nails it. I mean, he doesn't slip. He nails every single step going down those stairs, and it is eye-popping. It's absolutely eye-popping. Well, they couldn't get James Cagney either, so they settled for Dan Dailey. And Dan Dailey at this time, he was in a minstrel show in 1921 and later appeared in vaudeville, worked as a golf caddy and shoe seller before his first big break working for a South American cruise line in 1934. He made his Broadway debut in 1937 in Babes in Arms, and he followed it with Stars in Your Eyes and I Married an Angel. In 1940, he was assigned to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer to make films, and although his past career had been in musicals, he was initially cast in the drama Susan and God. He also played a Nazi in The Mortal Storm. He was a juvenile lead in The Captain is a Lady, 1940, and Dulcie. And he also appeared in a musical comedy, Hula Baloo, then had a small role in the drama Keeping Company and a juvenile in The Wild Man of Borneo. He could be seen in Washington Melodrama and Ziegfeld Girl, and played a gangster in The Getaway. Dailey was loaned out to 20th Century Fox for Moon Over Her Shoulder, 1941, and then appeared opposite Donna Reed in Moki. He was third billed in Sunday Punch. Universal borrowed him to support Leo Carrillo in Timber. He stayed at that studio for Give Out Sisters and a musical with Andrew Sisters and Donald O'Connor. Dailey's last film for MGM was Panama Hattie. It was a hit, and Dailey's career looked like it was going to the next level when cast in For Me and My Gal. However, Dailey was drafted, and Gene Kelly ended up taking the role. When Dailey returned to Hollywood, MGM did not renew his contract, which led him to sign a contract with 20th Century Fox. And that started with, of course, Mother Wore Tights, in which Dailey supported the studio's biggest star, Betty Grable. His part was built up during filming, and the movie was Fox's most popular movie of 1947. Now, this sequence right here is one of my favorites in the movie because this whole number that the adults are going to be doing in front of the kids is kind of a satiric take on Irving Berlin and how Irving Berlin had composed songs for every holiday, 4th of July, Christmas, Easter. He tackled them all except for Halloween. And like I said, I'm actually glad I waited to do this commentary second as the penultimate commentary for this, because we're now a week into October. So why not kick things? Why not watch a movie with a Halloween musical number? Now, of course, this is not necessarily a movie that's a Halloween staple, but I do think this song is, I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think it, Dan Daly and Betty Grable, they dance their asses off on stage and they look great together. But David Wayne and Jane Wyatt, they add tremendous support. And of course, they're entertaining all of the Pringles children right here, which there's like 6 of them. And so they drive out to this farmhouse with all these autumnal colors and costumes and everything, so we can do this amazing Halloween number, which, like I said, may be my favorite in the whole film. It may be my favorite, but hey, I mean, My Blue Heaven, I Love a New Yorker, Friendly Islands, all these songs, I think here again are perfectly placed. They're perfectly separated. And here again, they don't go over the top with them. Okay. I mean, this is, like I said, I don't want to say this is a standard or even a substandard musical. I mean, of that time, even with 20th Century Fox, but after Mother Wore Tights, Dan Daly and Betty Grable then did When My Baby Smiles at Me, which was a fictional story about another vaudeville couple. It didn't necessarily feel rushed to me, although to be perfectly honest, it wasn't near as good as Mother Wore Tights. Now, the one thing about When My Baby Smiles at Me, which stands out, is in fact Dan Daly, because he was nominated for an Academy Award, which was a rarity for a musical at that time. Although, to be perfectly honest, I mean, like one person that writes about the history of the Oscars a lot, Eric Beck, I quoted him with his comments on The Joker is Wild and the adaptation from the book for that last night. And what he said about When My Baby Smiles at Me was pretty damning, because he hated Dan Daly in this role. I mean, and look, I mean, the thing is that when you look back at the Oscar history in 1948, I think the most choice was, of course, Humphrey Bogart for The Treasure of Sierra Madre, which he does, in fact, point out. Why he wasn't nominated is a massive mystery. And, of course, the Academy would make it up later in 3 years for giving him the Oscar for, was it The African Queen? So now, after watching When My Baby Smiles at Me, I got to admit I was very impressed with Dan Daly's performance. The thing is that in this film, which of course, I mean, well, in Mother Wore Tights, which was essentially the first test to see if the audience would fall in love with Betty Grable and Dan Daly as a couple, which they in fact did. So then we got When My Baby Smiles at Me. Now, unfortunately, that movie, along with another one, the last one they did after My Blue Heaven, which is called Call Me Mister, unfortunately, those movies are not available for, well, you can watch When My Baby Smiles at Me on YouTube and Call Me Mister on YouTube, but they've never been released on physical media, which is a shame. In fact, I mean, like I said, a lot of Betty Grable's movies have not been released on Blu-ray. Mother Wore Tights eventually got a Blu-ray courtesy of Twilight Time. I've thought about picking it up, but I haven't gone that far yet. Here again, Twilight Time, they went out of business in 2020. And of course that Mother Wore Tights Blu-ray is now out of print as well, but you can still get it for like $20, $30. I mean, and now I love this part right here where, of course, the kids, they want more. I mean, another musical number, and of course, Jane Wyatt and David Wayne and Betty Grable and Dan Daly are like, no, sorry, kids, time to go to bed. We want to enjoy our cigarettes and our alcohol and have an orgy. So just have a good night, kids. Don't bother us for the rest of the. It was a joke, but I mean, look, it's just, I can't help but laugh. See, they bring out the alcohol. And that kid is awfully close to those bottles. And, David Wayne just cynically offers him a cigarette. Yeah, would you like a nightcap or a smoke before going up to bed? Yeah, sure. Now, look, I mean, is the orgy going too far? Here's the thing. there are some risque lines in this movie. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but at this time, the production code was still in very, very full force. But as I will point out, there are several lines here which are a bit risque for 1950, and you know, and I can't help it, but the question always goes in my mind is like, well, was that intentional? Was that intentional, or was it not intentional? And in this case, I mean, of course, it's impossible to say without asking the writers, but the thing is, it happened at least 3 or 4 times in this movie where I would say to myself, was that intentional or was that not intentional? Because I couldn't help but think of an alternative meaning for the words that they said. So, David Wayne is still wearing his skeleton costume, which I think is a pretty nice touch, considering the fact that Jane Wyatt played the piano and all that. So now, okay, so going back to Dan Daly and Betty Grable. So they did Mother Wore Tights. Then they did When My Baby Smiles at Me in 1948, which Daly got an Oscar nomination for that. And Mother Wore Tights also won for Best Music Score for Alfred Newman. So they were really going strong in terms of box office and in terms of awards at this time. And then they did My Blue Heaven, which was a modest hit. And the thing is, at this time, Betty Grable's star power was just beginning to fade. It was just beginning to fade at this time. There's a movie on Blu-ray I'm going to mention later that she's in, which is actually one of those examples from 1949. I forget the name of it. It's something Around the Bend or whatever. But yeah, I mean, her star power was starting to fade at this time. Now, after My Blue Heaven, they did one more film together, which was Call Me Mister. And that was essentially, set in, the war's ending, another war's ending musical where, Dan Daly and Betty Grable had a previous relationship and he misses her after, serving, time and everything. And he really wants to get back with Betty Grable, but she's reluctant to do so. And let's put it this way: Call Me Mister was okay. The thing is that of the 4 movies they made, I really liked Mother Wore Tights, aside from the fact that there was a midsection involving a puppet show that I think could have been dropped. I do think Mother Wore Tights maybe goes on maybe 6-7 minutes too long. I mean, I know that's a tiny complaint, but My Blue Heaven, I think it's perfect. I think it's pretty much perfect in terms of 96 minutes. I mean, yeah, and When My Baby Smiles at Me, unfortunately, the quality of the YouTube print is pretty bad. Now, and what I found a little disappointing about that particular movie was that we spent a lot of time talking in dressing rooms. When we're not on stage doing a song and dance number, we're in dressing rooms talking, having drinks, and talking about what the characters plan to do and how they feel about it. And you could say My Blue Heaven is even guilty of that a little bit. But see, with When My Baby Smiles at Me, it just seemed like when they weren't on a stage, they were in a dressing room. It really, really felt that way. Now, as far as Dan Daly's performance, it is impressive. I mean, he does, he goes into he has a drunken meltdown near the end of the film, which is actually very, very memorable. He starts to think that Betty Grable, when she brings home, I forget the actor's name. He was a silent film actor, Arlen. Oh man, I gotta look it up now. Richard Arlen, yeah, had taken a liking to Betty Grable in that movie, and goes to her dressing room, sits down, and talks with her. And of course, but she says, "Look, I'm very much in love with my husband. He's not perfect. He drinks, but and he's a womanizer." But oh, I'm sorry. In Call Me Mister, he was actually a womanizer. I think in When My Baby Smiles at Me, it wasn't so much. But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, Dan Daly did have a significant drinking problem, despite all his talents. Unfortunately, the bottle had taken over his life at several junctures. And in the 1970s, when he had long since retired and he was in his early 60s at that time, then he lost his son to suicide, very sadly. And that's when the alcoholism took over permanently, and he passed away in 1978. Betty Grable would die of cancer in 1971 at the age of 56, and Daly was 64. And this is a very, very funny moment where, he starts complaining about how they were rejected by the adoption agency and how, you know, he mentions truck drivers. And of course, there's a truck driver walking by. It's like, hey, wait a minute. What's wrong with truck drivers? Oh, no, no, no. I think you're just charming. And the guy's reaction here is priceless. Fade out. Good scene. Time to fade out. Ah, yes. We have arrived at the Cosmo Cosmetics commercial, which, of course, is the very, very first time that we see Mitzi Gaynor on screen. And there she is. And like I said, from the second that she appears, she is a movie star. She is absolutely stunning. I mean, her voice, her dancing, her beauty. Like I said, triple threat, and she just stuns in the very first sequence that she's in, doing this fake Cosmo Cosmetics commercial for this television station, because now the Morans they want to get into television now. And see, and look how Mitzi, she effortlessly, with almost no effort, look how she's like dancing on her toes and everything, showing off her legs, which may not have been insured for $1 million like Betty Grable's, but look, I mean, there's some scenes in this movie where Mitzi shows off her legs, and let's just say I had a little bit more of a reaction over Betty Grable's legs. Okay, just just saying. I'm just saying. And of course, right after that, we have the sequence that really showcases Betty Grable's legs in this movie, which is the musical number "I Love a New Yorker." Here again, absolutely delightful. I love the shift, love the costume, love the set. I mean, and just look how Betty is just dancing and just having a joy. I mean, she is just having the time of her life. It's like that shot of her leg right there is like, oh damn. My kind of woman who's out on the town to be seen. From the Waldorf down to Broadway. He's my pride and joy. I mean, it's just, it is wonderful. It is wonderful. I mean, like I said, I'm not lying. I enjoy every single minute of this movie. And I can't say that about all of Mitzi Gaynor's movies. I really can't. I mean, just, the hat that she wears, the headpiece, and the blue dress is just, eye-popping. Now, we should go ahead and talk about the director of this film, who is, in fact, a man by the name of Henry Koster. And if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because the same year, in 1950, when he directed My Blue Heaven, he also directed a certified classic with James Stewart called Harvey, about an invisible 6-foot, 3.5-inch rabbit who only James Stewart can see. And of course, the rabbit's name is Harvey. It's a classic comedy. If you've never seen it, very, very funny to this very day. But then, after I watched My Blue Heaven, I was like, wow, Henry Koster, 2 for 1. 2 for 1 for 1950, and he delivers. Now, he was a German-born film director and also the husband of actress Peggy Moran. And I'm beginning to wonder if, in fact, the Morans were named because of that. Although, to be perfectly honest, Henry Coster was not one of the screenwriters. In fact, it was Lamar Trotty and Claude Binion who had written the screenplay. And I had already talked about Lamar Trotty at length for the other commentaries. The one other commentary I did, which Mitzi is in, called "There's No Business Like Show Business," and that was also written by Lamar Trotty. And the other writer was a man by the name of Claude Binion. Now, Betty almost didn't do this movie because Claude Binion had originally been slated to direct. I don't know what her beef was with Claude Binion at all, but Binion was born in Chicago in 1905, passed away in 1978, same year as Dan Dailey. And he was a Chicago-based journalist for the Examiner newspaper and became city editor of the show business trade magazine Variety in the late 1920s. According to Robert Landry, who worked at Variety for 50 years, including as managing editor, Binion came up with the famous 1929 stock market crash headline, "Wall Street lays an egg." However, writer Ken Bloom ascribes the headline to Variety publisher Syme Silverman. Now, Claude Binion switched from writing about movies to Variety to screenwriting for the Paramount Studio with 1932's If I Had a Million. His later screenwriting credits included The Gilded Lady, 1935, Sing You Sinners, 1938, and Arizona in 1940. Throughout the 30s, Binion's scripts were often directed by Wesley Ruggles, including the classic True Confession from 1938. 14 feature films by Ruggles had screenplays by Binion. Claude Binion was also the scriptwriter for the second series of the Bing Crosby Entertains radio show from 34 to 35. In 1948, Binion made his directorial debut with The Saxon Charm, for which he also wrote the screenplay. And that film starred Robert Montgomery, Susan Hayward, John Payne, and Audrey Totter. He went on to write and direct the low-key comedy noir Stella in 1950, Mother Didn't Tell Me, and Aaron Slick of Pumpkin Creek, and the Clifton Webb farce Dreamboat. He directed but didn't write Family Honeymoon in 1949, as well as Bob Hope's sole venture into 3D, Here Come the Girls. Mm-hmm. So for some reason, though, Betty Grable did not, I almost said Betty Davis. No, but Betty Grable did not want Henry Coster to direct. In fact, she only agreed to do the movie if Lamar Trotty had rewritten the script and if Henry Coster replaced Claude Binion as director. That was her stipulations. Now, here's another great moment. Mitzi is just, young, flirtatious. She obviously finds Dan Dailey very, very attractive and very talented, obviously, and she just needs help with the zipper on her dress. And I love her reaction to that. But then you see Betty Grable, when she goes back in the door, she's like, "Oh, no, I don't have a problem with you zipping up her dress, but but she has that look about like, well, you better keep the zipper up." But you could tell Betty Grable just loves playing around when Dan Dailey even looks at another woman, because she knows that Dan Dailey, he can be a little vulnerable at times, and I think in the other films that they did, that they played with that dynamic a little bit too, because in like Call Me Mister, he said he was on duty or on assignment, and oh yeah, I saw the assignment. She was a redhead. Yeah, so that's the thing, is that Dan Dailey, when you're in show business, you have all these girls getting on you, even if you're married to a woman with $1 million legs. Now, as you can see, who came in here, Miss Irma Gilbert and her assistant. Now, Irma Gilbert on the left there, who's seated, is played by Una Merkel. And we talked all about Una Merkel in the commentary for Golden Girl, because she, in fact, played Mitzi Gaynor's mother in that, based on the famous entertainer from the Civil War, Lotta Crabtree. And, Una Merkel was, terrific. She was very, very believable, very funny as Mary Ann, who was Lotta Crabtree's mother. And even though that movie was very fictionalized, it did at the very, very least, I do think that it does honor the spirit of Lotta Crabtree, and certainly a lot more than the I Don't Care Girl from the same director, Lloyd Bacon, and also starring Mitzi Gaynor, which is still a mystery how that was shredded in the editing process. So much the movie was only 78 minutes, and there was this weird meta subplot where the producer George Jessel was asking for essentially testimonies about the I Don't Care Girl, who why does her name escape me right now? The queen of vaudeville. I can't believe that the name escapes me at the moment. Eva Tangway. Yeah, Eva Tangway. Yes, the queen of vaudeville. And like I said, I did a commentary on the I Don't Care Girl. You can listen to that as well. And so this is Una Merkel, who was later in Golden Girl. But what I knew her from when I was growing up, she was in the Disney movie The Parent Trap, where she played the housekeeper to David Keith after the girls switched places after summer camp. And she was very funny in that too, as Rabina. I especially love her moment in The Parent Trap when after they set up the stage with the recreation of their first dates and everything, and David Keith just walks out on the terrace. I was like, what the hell is all this? And Una Merkel as Rabina basically says, you didn't know what to think, you didn't know, had no idea what you had when you had it. And he's like, what? You had no idea what the hell you had. You had Maureen O'Hara. Okay, now this is Mrs. Johnston, the head of the adoption agency, played by Laura Pierpont. Yeah, Laura Pierpont. That is her name. And as you could see in the rather satiric script from Binion and Trotty, that they're kind of satirizing the whole attitudes of adoption agencies, where they did not trust show business couples. And it's very believable. I bought this 100%. I mean, because, and you here again, I mean, even though this woman is not brought out to be a villain, there's no villain in this movie. Okay, if anything, if there is a villain in this movie, it's bad luck. But I mean, she's not a bad person. She just, she looks at the headlines, she looks at the articles, she looks at the social fabric of the United States at this time and realizes that, show business people are very, very hard to trust. They tend to get divorced a lot more than the average American couple. They tend to drink a lot. They tend to smoke a lot. And of course, I mean, the weird thing is I can actually understand her concerns. It completely makes sense. And it doesn't make her out to be a bad person. She just has these reservations about giving babies to show business couples. It's not personal. It's not personal at all. But at the same time, I can also understand Dan Daly's reaction. Like, I mean, you can't throw all of these show business people into one bubble and say, okay, we can't give them babies because they'll probably screw up later as parents. I mean, you obviously can't do that. But here again, especially in this scene right here, when Irma Gilbert, who feels guilt, obviously she's not happy at the fact that this is about to go down and that she's about to lose another baby, essentially. But Mrs. Johnston, when she goes into their apartment and she sees everything that's going on, and she just has this this reaction on her that's like, yep, I knew it. Look, I mean, I don't think it goes into the arena of prejudice. I just think that I can completely understand her reservations and concerns about giving adopted babies to show business couples. I can actually see it in the terms of this movie. See, I mean, like, everybody is drinking, everybody is smoking. Back then, everybody smoked. I mean, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave the baby a cigarette after a year. I mean, everybody smoked back You know, my doctor recommends Camel cigarettes. Yes. But so here again, as devastating as this is, I completely understand Mrs. Johnson's point of view. She's not a bad woman. She is, like I said, she's being super protective of these children. And, you know, you can't say that about all of them. I mean, I remember I saw an Unsolved Mysteries episode one time where in the late 40s, early 50s, there was this adoption agency run by this, you know, this kindly grandmotherly woman, you know, and this was literally right before My Blue Heaven came out, where she would go to people's yards and steal babies. And she became rich doing that. Now, eventually the law caught up with her, and she essentially died without having to face any repercussions whatsoever. But of course, you know, Unsolved Mysteries, you know, where they put these adoption agencies in these horrible negative lights. And for here again, I understand, because, you know, these people, they got separated, their family members and everything, and because of that show, they were able to get back together after decades of separation. But look, I mean, you know, I can understand. I can actually understand why this adoption agency would be very, very cautious and very concerned based on a party, even if it was meant to just celebrate the baby coming home. You know, here, look at it. I mean, look at that. Everybody's smoking. I mean, it's like, you know, I'm surprised she didn't point that out too. But then again, this is the early 50s, where, you know, we had lobbyists say that smoking was actually healthy for you, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, this is a very, very devastating moment because, you know, Betty Grable, she had a miscarriage in the car accident, and now she just lost the baby that she thought she was going to adopt. And Una Merkel, give her credit, she went out of her way to get them a child, even though she knew that Mrs. Johnston would have these concerns. Okay. Oh, and yeah, the dog, you know, I mean, the dog has some scene stealing moments in this as well. But here we have the entrance of Louise Beavers as Selma. And she only has a few scenes in this movie. I think she only has 3 scenes, but every single one, wonderful. I mean, I fell in love with her immediately. Now, she is probably most well known for the 1934 film Imitation of Life, which just recently got a Criterion Blu-ray. But her acting career began as a member of the Lady Minstrels, a group of young women who staged amateur productions and appeared on stage at the Lowe's State Theater. Charles Butler, an agent for African-American actors, saw one of her early performances and recommended that she audition for the film role. Beavers was initially hesitant to audition for film roles because of the negative portrayal of blacks in film. She once said, quote, "In all the pictures I had seen, they never used colored people for anything except savages." However, she won a role in the film Uncle Tom's Cabin and went on to play traditional black roles such as those of a slave, a mother figure, a maid, or a domestic servant. After playing the role of Julia, the maid and mother figure, to a young woman in Coquette. Coquette was the movie where basically Mary Pickford, because she was an Academy Board member, practically bought her own Oscar. If there's anybody in the history of the Academy Awards that was less deserving of an Oscar, sorry to say, it was Mary Pickford. Anyway, Beavers gained more attention for her work and was able to transition to less stereotypical roles. Beavers played Delilah in Imitation of Life, again in the role of a housekeeper, but instead of the usual stereotypical comedic or purely functional role, Delilah's storyline constitutes a secondary parallel plot in which her problems are given considerable emotional gravity. Some in the media recognize the unfairness of Hollywood's double standard regarding race. A contribution to California Graphic Magazine wrote, quote, "The Academy could not recognize Miss Beavers. She is black," unquote. Beavers played the lead role in the film Reform School, 1939, once thought to be a lost film, as a forward-thinking probation officer who becomes the superintendent of a reform school and implements major changes. In the film Holiday Inn, Beavers performed a song during a minstrel show number celebrating Abraham Lincoln's birthday. Very controversial number. Because the number features Bing Crosby and others in blackface, some consider it racially offensive, and it is often excised from television screens of the film. Even though there are historians out there that champion Holiday Inn much more than White Christmas, believe it or not. Beavers was one of three actresses, including Hattie McDowell and Ethel Waters, to portray housekeeper Beulah on the Beulah television show, the first TV sitcom to star a black actor. She also played a maid for the first two seasons of the Danny Thomas Show. Now, that is actually interesting because I just watched Danny Thomas in Call Me Mister. He has a huge supporting role in the Dan Daly, Betty Grable movie Call Me Mister as a GI. And on top of all that, I also found out that that he had been with, if I'm not mistaken, forget it. I'm not going to try to find the name, but he was actually not married to somebody, but he had a relationship to somebody that had another connection to these films. I just don't remember the name, and I can't find it right now. But yeah, Danny Thomas was a huge TV star at the time. And as Beaver's career grew, some criticized her for the roles that she accepted, alleging that such roles institutionalized the view that blacks were subservient to whites. Beavers dismissed the criticism, acknowledging the limited opportunities available, but saying, quote, "I'm only playing the parts. I don't live them," unquote. As she became more widely known, Beavers began to speak against Hollywood's portrayal and treatment of African Americans, both during production and after promoting the films. Beavers became active in public life, seeking to help support African Americans. She endorsed Robert S. Abbott, the editor of the Chicago Defender, who fought for African American civil rights. She supported Richard Nixon, who she believed would help Black Americans in the struggle for civil rights. Now, and then she was inducted into the Black Filmmakers Hall of Fame in 1976. And her last film, she did so many movies. She did at least 60, 70 films from 1927 all the way until 1960 with The Facts of Life. And, she was also in the Jackie Robinson story as Jackie's mother, I Dream of Jeannie, the movie as Mammy, a 1952 movie. It has nothing to do with the show. You Can't Run Away From It, Tammy and the Bachelor, The Goddess, All the Fine Young Cannibals. Yeah, that is an actual movie with Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner. All the Fine Young Cannibals. But, like I said, Louise Beavers, she may have only has 3 scenes, but she does make an impression with those 3 scenes. Now, David Wayne, being the good friend that he is, has arranged to, since the adoption agency did not go ahead and give them the child that they had in their arms for just a brief moment, David Wayne arranges to buy a baby, basically illegally. You can see them going to the back of this house. It's very, very dark. Kind of a, and they, and Betty Grable and to a lesser extent Dan Daly, they start to feel uncomfortable. They don't know if this is the right thing to do. They don't know what the baby's situation is in terms of her mother or father, and that's what I'm saying is that because this is done illegally, I can understand their reluctance to go ahead and take the child, even though by this time they're just they've already lost 2 babies under 2 different completely set of circumstances, and now they're going to almost desperate means to get a baby, and in this case illegally. But David Wayne wants them to be happy, and we can understand that. And I think that David Wayne and Jane Wyatt, to a certain extent, they feel a little responsible for when they lost that child, and so this is their way of making it up to them. But Betty just doesn't feel this is right, and you can tell immediately, from her performance here, that she doesn't feel comfortable doing this, and I can completely understand why. Now they bring the baby out, and of course they take one look, but Betty is pretty she's pretty adamant that she doesn't want to take the baby, regardless of what the circumstances are, just because of how it's being transacted. Very, very cute baby. And of course, the funny thing is that as Drew Casper says on the commentary, they could only like keep the babies in, for like, I think up to like 15 minutes or something. Like they really had to speed up. It's like, okay, bring in the baby, bring in the baby. We got to shoot this now. We got to shoot this now. So these babies don't have a lot of screen time. And see, and that's one of my concerns going into this film was I was worried that there were going to be kids and babies everywhere. And there really isn't. I mean, we get to see the Pringles children when they're at the farmhouse doing that musical number, and we have of course the babies that we see for just a moment or two, like right here. But this movie is not overflowing with children and babies. This is essentially Betty Grable's baby shower movie. Yeah, this was essentially her baby shower movie. So yeah, it's not like in every scene that there are kids everywhere, even though this is a movie about a couple who want a baby and they want children. All right, now let me see. We are at the 59-minute mark. The 59-minute mark for My Blue Heaven. We're getting close to being done here. We only have about 36 minutes left. Let me go through my list here real quick. Oh, yes. The movie is also based on the short story Stork Don't Bring Babies by S.K. Loren. And I was also going to talk about the editor, James B. Clark, because I recognized his name immediately because he had worked on at least 15 episodes of the Batman television series. And as I've said in other commentaries, what I knew David Wayne the most from was playing the Mad Hatter on the Batman television series. Now, I did go so far as to check to see if James B. Clark had directed any of those Mad Hatter episodes, but he didn't. As a matter of fact, David Wayne probably appeared in 4 episodes maybe as the Mad Hatter. I mean, very, very memorable role for him, I'm sure. But, then again, I mean, back then, people knew David Wayne from being a star on Broadway and eventually into these films. And he made 4 films with Betty Grable. He was no, not Betty Grable, Mitzi Gaynor. He did 4 movies with Mitzi Gaynor. He was also in We're Not Married, where he was in another segment of that anthology film. He was also in Down Among the Sheltering Palms, as well as the I Don't Care Girl. And the first 2 I mentioned, I think they only share like 1 scene together. I think in Down Among the Sheltering Palms and We're Not Married, they only share 1 scene. Whereas the I Don't Care Girl, they do have several scenes together because David Wayne is one of those that claims that he discovered, Eva Tangway and is relaying his story to the producer, George Jessel. Here's Louise Beavers again. This is my birthday. I'm going to a party. And I love what she has on her head, the purple and the flowers. That's just great. And Dan Daly just has this infectious grin that I couldn't help. I just couldn't help but love this guy's grin all throughout the movie. And, when my baby smiles at me in the last half hour, when he goes on this drunken collapse, essentially, where he's crying, he's moping, he's drinking, massive difference. It's night and day. It's absolutely night and day. Now, the Mrs. Bates, or AKA Old Mule Face, as she's termed here, is played by an actress named Minerva Urasol. If I probably butchered that last name, but Minerva Uracol, maybe, I think. I don't know. But she was born in Eureka, California in 1894. She was originally, again, a vaudeville performer before venturing into radio and stage, later making her film debut in 1933. She played largely uncredited roles such as secretaries, laundresses, and frontierswomen, she began working in television in the 50s, favoring westerns. From 32 to 37, she played Mrs. Pascal on the Sunday night Hijinks radio program. On television, she played Ma Bowie, mother of the title character in The Adventures of Jim Bowie. She guest starred on CBS's My Friend Flicka, Roy Rogers, The Lone Ranger, and the syndicated The Range Rider. She also had recurring roles in the 53-54 situation comedy Meet Mr. McNutley in the role of Josephine Bradley, the dean of a women's college. The program was broadcast on CBS radio and TV. She also played Billy the Barber in the 1950 episode of The Lone Ranger as Billy the Great. And in 1957, she had her only starring television role on the syndicated The Adventures of Tugboat Annie, playing the title character, originally performed by Marie Dressler in the film Tugboat Annie in 1933, and continued by Marjorie Rambeau and Jane Darwell in 2 sequels. Later in 1957, she appeared as a landlady in the Perry Mason episode The Case of the Fan Dancer's Horse. And she replaced actress Hope Emerson as nightclub owner Mother for season 2 of The Private Detective Peter Gunn. Now, look how Mitzi just raises her legs so high up in the air. This is another great novelty song, which is set in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And just Mitzi Gaynor just owns the screen. She owns the screen, literally. I mean, with Betty Grable, back home taking care of the baby. But she's also watching this on television, which, of course, now we have this meta element. We have this meta element where she's basically watching her husband dance with Mitzi Gaynor on television. And, I kept on thinking, and I think Drew Casper from his commentary made me think of it, where, Daryl Zanuck, of course, he had replaced Alice Faye with Betty Grable. And so Betty Grable knew full well that her time was going to come where a younger actress was going to take over the reins and replace her. And so Mitzi Gaynor, in a weird way, when she was cast in this movie, Zanuck was basically sending Betty a message and said, hey, just remember, we have somebody like Mitzi Gaynor waiting in the wings to replace you. So, you better not complain. You better not complain at all. So, but yeah, she is on fire in this number. She really is on fire. And like I said, when she's on that pool table and she starts showing off her legs on that on there, I was like, Betty, your legs may be insured for $1 million, but yeah, you've definitely got some competition here. It's telling you that right now. And you got to remember that Mitzi was 19. She was barely 19 years old when she filmed this movie. But, of course, she didn't necessarily become a star overnight. But, of course, right after this, she did Take Care of My Little Girl. She had a small role in that. And then she started getting starring roles in Golden Girl and The I Don't Care Girl, which I just did commentaries on, where she played 2 different entertainers, 2 different stage entertainers, one from the Civil War and one from vaudeville. Eva Tangway, the queen of vaudeville, and Lotta Crabtree, the queen of the Civil War dance stage, I guess. Yeah, that sounded weird, but... And so after those films, and none of her films really made that much money. I mean, Golden Girl made about 1.5. I Don't Care Girl made about 1/4, that kind of thing. In fact, when she was at 20th Century Fox, I mean, her biggest hit wouldn't come until 54 when she did There's No Business Like Show Business, which, here again, I think that's one of her least of the Fox films, because I don't like the fact that Marilyn Monroe practically steals the spotlight from everybody else, including Broadway legend Ethel Merman. And Dan Daly was in that as well. Dan Daly played Mitzi's father in that as part of this showbiz family. Hey, Dan, how you doing? Yeah, nice to. Hey, Stone, nice to see you on early today. Yep. I'm finishing this project that I started 5 weeks ago. I got 2 commentaries left, and I'm very, very happy to be finishing this project once and for all. Finally. And I know I had something else to say, and I forgot off the top of my head, but it's fine. And so yeah, this right here, where Betty Grable is just so don't you ask for trouble. Take my advice, gal. It won't be nice, gal. Yeah, but Mitzi's the I don't care gal. So I mean, she doesn't care. She doesn't care at all what she has to say. She doesn't care. And like I said, this number is called Work Hard, Love Hard, Play Hard. Oh no, is it? No, it's Work Hard, Play Hard, Love Hard. I forget the the sequence, but yeah, I mean, I just love every second of this. And of course, Betty goes into her own dance number right here. Now, as I said before, when it comes to double entendres, okay, and risque dialogue, this is probably the biggest example. And I think look, I just, I understand that, they had to get around the production code. So they wrote these risque lines, which basically went over the heads of the censors. I mean, of course, the most famous is in The Big Sleep, where Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall are in a restaurant, and they're talking about gambling. And of course, and she says something to the effect, well, about dating. Well, it all depends on who's in the saddle. It's like, how did the production code did not notice that? And I brought up Batman earlier. There's a great moment in one of those episodes with Julie Newmar's The Catwoman, where she actually says, while looking at Batman's crotch, about having her cake and eating it too. That's not a joke. That's not a joke. Go back and watch those episodes. I mean, these lines scream double entendre. And this is a perfect example when Mitzi Gaynor goes up to Dan Daly and just says, "Rack 'em back, daddy-o," and she turns off the TV. So was that a double entendre? I'll let you decide. But the answer is yes. Rack 'em back, daddy-o. Yeah. And of course, this would parallel a little bit later when Mitzi goes into Dan Daly's dressing room to basically throw herself at him. Yeah, that's going to come into play later. But the way that Betty Grable handles it, it's pure class, and very, very funny, very, very funny stuff. All right, let me go to IMDb real quick because I know that I saw some trivia notes I wanted to share real quick. And of course, I still need to go over the films that are available on physical media that have Betty Grable in it, which not a lot. There's very few movies that are out with Betty Grable on Blu-ray, which is actually very, very sad. But let's see. Lux Radio Theater broadcast a 60-minute radio adaptation of the movie on February 25th, 1952, with Grable and Daly reprising their roles. Now, and this has a 6.2 rating on IMDb, which I wish that was higher. I do wish that was higher, but a lot of the reviews are still very, very good. I mean, there's only 20 reviews, but 9 out of 10, My Blue Heaven, almost a penny serenade musical. My Blue Kitsch, Betty Grows Up, 8 out of 10. Better Than Most Musicals, my childhood favorite. Actually, the reviews are much more mixed. I'm actually surprised there's some bad reviews here, like 1 out of 10. Oh, the Autograph Girl right here. I believe she's the one on the right with the hat on. Um, oh, who is she, real quick? She just left the screen. Oh man, I completely forgot who this is. Plays one of the autograph hounds. Oh, where is she? Where is she? Where is she? Oh man, I completely forgot on this one too. Yeah, I'm sorry. I completely forgot who one of the autograph girls was, because I mean I noted that she was a name, but I just can't recall right now. Hmm. Well, so I think it's about time that we need to talk about the producer of the film, Saul C. Siegel, who, of course, would later go on to produce Les Girl, which I will be doing later today. All right. He was born in 1903 in New York City. In the early 30s, he was a sales manager for the Brunswick Columbia record label. In 1934, he began his Hollywood career by assisting his brother Moe with the merger of 6 small production studios in Republic Pictures. He stayed on to Republic as an executive producer, working with Gene Autry and John Wayne. Uh, During a contract dispute between Republic and Gene Autry, Mr. Siegel brought in a member of the singing group called the Sons of the Pioneers, whose name was Leonard Sly, and changed his screen name to Roy Rogers. In October 1940, Siegel left his position as head of Republic Studios to be a producer at Paramount. In 1946, he moved to 20th Century Fox. Two of the films he produced there, A Letter to Three Wives and Three Coins in the Fountain, were both nominated for Academy Awards for Best Picture. He also produced The Iron Curtain and later the Marilyn Monroe musical Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, as well as the star-studded High Society for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, starring Frank Sinatra, Grace Kelly, Bing Crosby, and Louis Armstrong. In 1956, Siegel joined Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Towards the end of the year, Dore Schary was fired as head of production, and Siegel was rumored to be given his job. However, Ben Thau got the job, and Siegel remained a producer, making Les Girl, Man on Fire, Mary Andrew, and Some Came Running. Siegel was appointed head of studio operations at MGM for 3 years in April of 1958. The following month, he was appointed vice president in charge of production. By this stage, the studio had already greenlit a number of movies that would go on to be major successes, including Ben-Hur and North by Northwest. During Siegel's time, MGM produced the major Cinerama epic How the West Was Won, and he was also the subject of an extortion attempt. The success of Ben-Hur encouraged Siegel to authorize a series of remakes at MGM, such as Cimarron, Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and Mutiny on the Bounty. All these films lost money. This, along with a number of box office failures, led him to be replaced as head of production in January of 1962 by Robert M. Whiteman. Siegel then began working as an independent producer, ran his own production company from 1964 to 1967. I mean, yeah, when he was at Fox, he made some really, really big films. And then, of course, after Some Came Running, he just never got that power ever again, unfortunately. But he also directed, he also produced Butterfield 8, which got Elizabeth Taylor her one Academy Award, Where the Boys Are, King of Kings, The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm, and his last film that he produced was In the Cool of the Day, starring Peter Finch and Jane Fonda and Angela Lansbury from 1963. And before we before we go into physical media, let's also talk about the cinematographer real quick. Just 1 second. Yeah, the cinematographer was a guy by the name of Arthur E. Arling. That was his name. Born in 1906, passed away in 1991 at the age of 85. Hollywood cinematographer and cameraman. One of his first gigs was Gone with the Wind in 1939. And then he won an Academy Award, shared it with Charles Rosher and Leonard Smith for the 1946 classic The Yearling. He was also nominated for an Oscar for the 1955 Lillian Roth biopic I'll Cry Tomorrow. And he also served as a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy during World War II. Yeah. So aside from The Yearling and My Blue Heaven, later he did Waybash Avenue. He also shot Call Me Mister, which is the film that Betty Grable and Dan Daly did afterward. He also shot Ransom, the original Ransom from 1955 with Glenn Ford, Tammy and the Bachelor, Kathy O, The Story of Ruth, Lover Come Back, Boys Night Out, My Six Loves, Straight Jacket, Once Before I Die, and in the very last film that he shot was called Ski Party from 1960, one of the beach party movies, but instead of the beach, we're on the slopes. So, so yeah, that was the last film that Arthur E. Arling shot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And okay. And we're coming up here on the South Pacific number where Mitzi comes out. And Cosmo Cosmetics present to you a takeoff on a musical that's fresh and new. This famous operetta set the country on its ears, and we predict it's going to run for years and years and years. For those of you who haven't seen it but have heard that it's terrific, we're going to take you to the Friendly Islands in the South Pacific. And we know you'll find them very, very friendly. So it was kind of prophetic. It was the shot of the sailor and the island girl just kills me every single time. But anyway, so now we have the Friendly Islands musical number, which of course is a spoof of South Pacific. Now, as all Mitzi Gaynor fans know, she later starred in the movie version of South Pacific in 1958, which of course was her zenith, where she, all throughout 20th Century Fox from 1950 to 1954, perfect training ground for her. She then went to Paramount for 3 films, then MGM for Les Girl with producer Saul C. Siegel. And then after that, Fox had hired her for South Pacific. And in fact, another film that she did before that called Down Among the Sheltering Palms also was a takeoff on South Pacific. So I think it was kind of written in the stars almost that Mitzi Gaynor was bound to play the Navy nurse in South Pacific, because after My Blue Heaven and Down Among the Sheltering Palms, it's pretty obvious where Fox said, yeah, I think it's Mitzi. I think we got to give it to Mitzi. She's the one. I mean, because I don't know if she was necessarily fired after There's No Business Like Show Business. I think her contract basically ended, but it was also one of those things where Fox just chose not to renew the contract. So she left Fox under less than joyful circumstances. And so then she went to Paramount and MGM. She made these other movies. And then finally, Fox brought her back for South Pacific. But as you can see, Betty Grable here is doing the number, and she's amazing in this. The lion just comes up and shakes the guy's hand. There's these weird little character moments in this I love, like during the I Love a New Yorker number, when she's actually putting perfume on, she actually sticks it down in her cleavage for like a millisecond. She basically does this and puts perfume on her cleavage, which is like, why? She's just going along with the rhythm of the music. That's all. Yeah. See these numbers. I mean, they're just so they are fun, but they are also very funny, and that's why I like every single number in this movie. See, that was another thing when I watched Call Me Mister. One of the things about Call Me Mister that I think is the reason why it's not really broadcast that often is because of the shall we say, Japanese stereotypes. There's a scene early on where all these geisha girls come out to worship the American soldier. No, I'm dead serious. It's like they come all out. There's a stage, and then right in the middle is a cutout, a cardboard cutout of an American GI, and they're basically just worshiping him. It's really really weird, and this is supposed to be when World War II ends. I'm not sure after Hiroshima that Japanese girls were interested in American soldiers. I just don't see that. And of course, who in fact comes out as a geisha girl, but of course Betty Grable. And there was another scene later where Dan Daly has to get out of the female barracks, so he pretends like he puts one of those hats on his head and everything, and pretends to be like a Japanese gardener, and he's just rushing out real quick. Those things would not fly today. They would just not fly today. But then again, I didn't find Call Me Mister unwatchable. There's one hilarious moment in it where Dan Daly wants to meet with Betty Grable, and but instead of cabs, he has to jump on this basically this chair, and a Japanese guy is just like running, and so we see the guy running and running and running, and then he's starting to slow down, and then who takes over but Dan Daly while the guy is resting. So I like that made me laugh, and I was like, you know what, that hits, that does hit for me. It's like the poor Japanese guy just wanted to get him to the city to meet Betty Grable, and so when he was about to collapse, Dan Daly took over. It's like, I got it. I got the last mile here. It's great. It's just great. And I just don't. That movie and When My Baby Smiles at Me are the two weaker films I think that Dan Daly and Betty Grable did, even though they're both watchable. They're still perfectly watchable. But Mother Wore Tights and My Blue Heaven are still the ones that I absolutely prefer. And like I said, of the quartet of films that they did together, this is my favorite, hands down. Ah, yes, I just want to relax with Betty Grable in the hut now. But no, she ends up taking the pillow and she goes outside to relax. And the lions come back on stage and nope, 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 you leave her alone. Leave her alone. Well, if lions are going to tell you to leave Betty Grable alone, you leave Betty Grable alone, okay? So we're now at the hour and 26-minute mark. We got approximately 8 minutes left to go. And we just got through the South Pacific Friendly Islands spoof number. So now we should go ahead and talk about what films are available on Blu-ray that have Betty Grable. Now, Mother Wore Tights, like I said, was released 3,000 copies, limited edition. You can get a used copy for $12, which is actually pretty damn good. Or you can buy it for 30. And I think there's only one extra feature on it, which is a radio program, a Mother Wear Tights radio program. But yeah, there's only like 6 films available on Blu-ray with Betty Grable, and there's no 4Ks at all. So aside from Mother Wore Tights, The Beautiful Blonde from Bashful Bend, which was not a real moneymaker for Betty Grable, that's available on Blu-ray courtesy of Kino. And that, as a matter of fact, has no extra features whatsoever. How to Marry a Millionaire is, of course, available on Blu-ray, but of course, they don't really showcase Betty Grable on the cover. They showcase Marilyn Monroe. That's what I was thinking of that I wanted to throw out there real quick. This is very, very important. And yes, Drew Casper, to give credit where credit is due, did mention this on his own commentary. But okay, so a lot of people think that Betty Grable told Marilyn Monroe the very famous quote, "I got mine, now you get yours." Well, in reality, she did not say that to Marilyn Monroe. She said that to her co-star Dan Daly when they did Mother Wore Tights. And I want to throw that out there. I want to repeat it because I think it is worth repeating. And aside from that, Pinup Girl from 1943, that is also available on a Twilight Time Blu-ray. And does that have any bonus features? It does. It has an audio commentary with film historian Richard Schickel, as well as a deleted musical number called This Is It. And that is also limited to 3,000 units. And you can get a used copy for $15 or a new one for $19 right now. So yeah, Pinup Girl and Mother Wore Tights are two excellent ones to pick up. Coney Island, 20th Century Fox actually gave Coney Island a release. And then finally, last but not least, I Wake Up Screaming from Kino Lorber from 1941, where she co-starred with Victor Mature and Carol Landis, is also available on Blu-ray for $17. And there is a commentary on there from film noir historian Eddie Muller. So not a lot of movies on physical media that have Betty Grable, which, and I said this before on some of the other commentaries, that I just don't understand why Fox couldn't have put out like a Mitzi Gaynor box set of all her movies. You know, just put all her movies that she made at Fox into one set. They did that to Marilyn Monroe. I would make the argument I think Mitzi Gaynor deserves one as well. I think that she absolutely deserves one, you know, along with Betty Grable. I don't understand why Fox only showed favoritism to Marilyn Monroe. Probably, I guess, just because, okay, fine. Betty Grable and Mitzi Gaynor are not nearly as well known. They weren't nearly as big as Marilyn back then. But as incendiary as this sounds, I think they both have a hell of a lot more talent than Marilyn did. Not to say Marilyn didn't have talent. I'm just saying that as actresses, as singers, I think they blew Marilyn Monroe out of the water. I really do think they did. And it bothers me that they never got a box set when I felt that they deserved box sets as well, just like Marilyn. Yeah. Oh, so anyway, this DVD, which I was going to talk about here real quick, we got about 6 minutes left to go. But this DVD was released by 20th Century Fox in 2006. It has an audio commentary by noted film historian Drew Casper, who taught it, I think, at USC. And there's a photo gallery along with collectible lobby cards and a couple of trailers for a few other Betty Grable movies. But there's also a booklet in here. As you can see, there's a booklet with a very short essay courtesy of Sylvia Stoddard, noted film historian and television writer, published books and articles on classic TV, film, and musical theater. And she also provides audio commentaries on DVDs, but not for this one. No, they gave the commentary to Drew Casper. And to be fair, his commentary is great. It is absolutely great. I mean, you know, he keeps talking. He has a lovely voice to listen to. He knows his history when it comes to these 20th Century Fox musicals, and he really does deliver on that commentary. But I just want to quote Sylvia Stoddard real quick with this essay here. The story of a couple adopting a child had been done before in the movies, but having a character suffer a miscarriage was a relatively rare type of story, especially for a musical film with 8 songs. Critics of the day were quite impressed with the breadth and depth of the story for a film of this kind. Also unique to this picture were parodies of other musicals, including one with Grable in a black wig and Daly doing an impersonation of Ezio Pinza from the smash Broadway hit South Pacific, and the Rodgers and Hammerstein show that opened in '49, which also starred Mary Martin. The parody even used the phrase "Happy Talk," one of South Pacific's songs, and "Some Enchanted Stranger," a humorous reference to Some Enchanted Evening. The Halloween song the four principals sing is also a send up of songs about holidays. The Mac Gordon Harry Warren tube pays tribute to Irving Berlin, who wrote many songs about the holidays for the 1942 film Holiday Inn. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Casting the babies for this movie was difficult because director Henry Koster wanted them to be only 2 or 3 weeks old. And they obviously couldn't be cast in advance, and they were limited by California welfare regulations to work not more than 30 seconds. Yeah, not work more than 30 seconds in any single shot for a total work period of not more than 20 minutes. The infants could only be on the studio premises less than 2 hours per day because regulations were looser with older children. Newborns were ultimately not used. And then we got these lobby cards right here. Show these off just real quick. Yeah, there's them doing the Halloween number right there. Yeah. And then there you go. So there's four lobby cards, there's a nice booklet, and there's a commentary. And you know what? Yeah, I would say that's a nice substantial package right there. And like I said, you can still get the DVD on eBay, and I would highly, highly recommend you pick up a copy because, here again, I do think this is one of Mitzi Gaynor's best movies, even though this is technically not her movie. And also of the four films that Betty Grable and Dan Daly did, I do think this is the best one. So very, very beautiful DVD from 20th Century Fox, along with Bloodhounds of Broadway. Even though this one doesn't have a commentary on it, they did include bonus features, as you can see. And it's, these marquee musical DVDs were, a great idea. But here again, I just don't understand why they chose only these two movies to do it for and not Golden Girl, which they gave a pretty pathetic release where the picture quality is just almost unwatchable. It's just practically unwatchable. And like I said, at 6 p.m. later today, we will be doing Les Girls, which is my number one favorite Mitzi Gaynor movie. So looking forward to getting that done and ultimately getting this project done. Because like I said, after that 6 p.m. commentary, we will finally, last but not least, do a full ranking of all 17 of Mitzi Gaynor's movies. So it's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. And so we're about to close My Blue Heaven. Mitzi Gaynor is here in the final scene, as you can see, along with the entire cast. Jane Wyatt, David Wayne, and of course Dan Daly, and of course the happiest of the endings that you could hope for this kind of movie, where instead of one baby, they end up with 5. After all the the miscarriage and the having their difficulties with the adoption agency, I mean, they were blessed at the end of the movie with not 1 child but 5. So, and here's the very last scene in the movie, the last 30 seconds, where Dan Daly and Betty Grable comfort each other in their moment of joy, and the dog is there in the background just looking. They kiss. The dog then scurries up onto the couch because he doesn't want to see them kissing. How they got the dog to do this, I will never ever know. But wonderful movie, wonderful DVD release, and a great commentary with Drew Casper available on there, which I did my best not to repeat everything that he says. I did repeat some things, but not everything, because I wanted to obviously make this commentary my own. But also, it's great to see you, Jay. Absolutely. Thank you, Jay and Dan, for stopping in and saying hi and showing support here. Like I said, I will see you all in a couple hours as we will do the commentary for Les Girl, and then we will do the final Mitzi Gaynor ranking. Absolutely looking forward to it. So thank you for joining me for this commentary from My Blue Heaven, and I'll see you all in a couple hours.